In this section, we're going to go over operations of functions. So when it says operation, it's talking about the standard for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So when it says operation of function, it just basically means that with addition, you're just adding two functions together. Subtraction, you're just subtracting two functions. Multiplication, you're going to multiply the two functions. And then division is just, you're just going to divide the functions. So, in the first one, f plus g of x just means that you're going to have f of x added with g of x. F minus g of x will equal to f of x minus g of x. And then right here, look closely, it's a dot. So f times g of x means f of x times g of x. Now these two here. This one, f divided by g of x, means that f of x will be divided by g of x, where g of x does not equal to 0. Now the reason I wrote this is when it's g divided by f of x, that means that g of x will be divided by f of x, where f of x does not equal to 0. So for division, whatever's on top stays on top. So if it's f, then f of x. If it's g, then g of x. Keep in mind, all this will not always be f and g. There's going to be other cases where there's going to be other letters used. So for example, in place of f, it could be h, and in place of g, it could be m, or u, or w, or p. So again, keep in mind that f and g will not always be used. Other letters might be used. Just keep the order the same. In the first example, I'm going to use these two functions. F of x equals 3x minus 1 and g of x equals x minus 1. And I will use these two same functions for the other three operations, but right now we're going to focus on addition. So when it's f plus g of x, it's just f of x plus g of x. So I'm just going to follow this format. So our first one is f of x. So we got to follow the order carefully and always follow the order for all operations. So f of x will be first, so I'm going to write 3x minus 1, and we'll write in parentheses because it's a function, then plus, I'm going to write x minus 1 in parentheses. So 3x minus 1, that's f of x, plus x minus 1, that's g of x. Now what I'm going to do is distribute the plus. So when I'm distributing, I can get rid of the parentheses in the first set, so 3x minus 1. Again, I didn't change any sign, I didn't change any number because there's nothing in front except for a positive invisible 1. Now this positive to this x, that would just be plus x. This positive to this minus 1 would just be minus 1. So after distributing, we're just going to combine like terms. So these two x's will be combined and the numbers will be combined. So 3x plus x, that's 4x, and minus 1 minus 1, well, that's going to be minus 2. So f plus g of x equals 4x minus 2. So that's all you have to write. Now sometimes you don't have to write this part. Sometimes you can just write it and box it. So again, it doesn't have to be like this exactly on a test. You can just box that. Second example, now we're going to focus on subtracting, and we're using the same two functions. So again, we're just going to follow this format. So f of x is first, so 3x minus 1 in parentheses, and then minus g of x, which is this. So x minus 1 in parentheses. So after we set it up, I'm going to distribute the minus. So again, since there's nothing except for a invisible 1, I'm going to drop the parenthesis, bring down 3x minus 1. Then I'm going to distribute the minus to this positive x, which will make it minus x. This minus to this negative 1, that will change to a plus 1. Now, combine like terms. So all the x go together, and all the numbers will go together. So 3x minus x, that will be 2x, minus 1 plus 1, well, that's just going to be plus 0, but you can just write 2x. So f minus g of x will equal just 2x. So that's the form, and that's the answer. And again, you don't have to write exactly like this. You can just write 2x in box, but I'm just writing for the notation. Example 3. Now we're going to focus on multiplication. So f times g of x equal f of x times g of x. Keep in mind, multiplication is a dot. So following this format, we're going to multiply these two functions. So f of x, I'm going to write 3x minus 1, and I'm going to put in parentheses, and then g of x. So x minus 1 in parentheses. So what I'm going to do when I set it like this, I'm going to FOIL. So 3 of x will go to the x and the minus 1. And then this minus 1 go to this x and then minus 1. So I'm going to write it step by step to see what's going on. So our first one is 3x times x. So then that means it's just 3x squared. And then 3x times minus 1 will be minus 3x. Now I'm finished with this part. So next is minus 1 times x. So that's going to be minus x. And then minus 1 times minus 1, that's plus 1. So again, I'm just foiling. Now we're going to combine like terms. So the only thing we can combine like terms are these two, because they both have x. So minus 3x and minus x. Now the x squared can't combine because none of these, this doesn't have a square and this doesn't have a square, so they cannot be combined with that. And this is just a number, there's no variable, so the only thing you can combine is these two right here. So we're going to write it in 3x squared minus 3x and minus x, well, that will be minus 4x, and then plus 1. And I usually put it in order from highest exponents to the lowest. So f times g of x is 3x squared minus 4x plus 1. So that's our answer for multiplication. And again, follow the order. So since f of x is first, 3x minus 1 will go first, g of x goes second, so x minus 1 goes second. And again, this is just a notation. If you have this answer, you can just box it, and that's it. Alright, so fourth example is division. So the reason I wrote both of them is because I want y'all to practice with the different orders. So in this one, f divided by g of x, it means f of x will be on the top and g of x will be on the bottom. So let's do that one first. So this form, 3x minus 1. Now this one you don't have to worry about parentheses. And then g of x on the bottom, so x minus 1. So we're almost done because there's nothing you can simplify. Now, again, we can't cross anything out because there's an operation. So when there's an operation, minus or addition, we cannot cross out the 1's and we cannot cross out the x. Now, if it's multiplying or it's dividing in the top or bottom of a fraction, then there's a possibility we may be able to simplify. But in this case, we cannot. So again, if there's a minus and there's a plus, there's nothing you can simplify. So that means you should not cross out anything unless there's multiplication or division on the top. So our next step is to find what x cannot equal to so this does not become 0. So what we usually do is we set the denominator, which is x minus 1, not equal to 0. Not equal to 0. So we're going to solve for x plus 1 plus 1. So x equals 1. Well, not equal to 1. So this one right here, f divided by g of x equal 3x minus 1 divided by x minus 1, where x does not equal to 1. So that's your answer. And again, you would just box that, but I want to box the whole thing. Now, let me explain why we're doing this. So, the reason we're saying x does not equal to 1 is because if we plug it in, it will make the denominator 0. So, say I plug it in. So I'm going to plug into all the x. So 3 times 1 minus 1 over 1 minus 1. So I plug 1 into all the x. So the top would be just 3 minus 1 over 1 minus 1. And then 3 minus 1 on the top is just 2. And then 1 minus 1 is 0. So whenever we have a denominator 0, it will be undefined. So we can't have that. That's why we're going to say x does not equal to 1. So we can plug any numbers into x except for just 1. Alright, now I'm going to do g divided by f. So we're going to do this form. So g of x is going to be on the top, so x minus 1, and then divide by f of x, so 3x minus 1. Next is you're going to set this, the denominator, not equal to 0. So 3x minus 1 not equal to 0. So plus 1 both sides. So 3x not equal to 1. Then divide by 3. So x does not equal to 1/3. So g divided by f of x equal to this one right here, x minus 1 over 3x minus 1, where x does not equal to 1/3. So g divided by f of x equal to x minus 1 over 3x minus 1, where x does not equal to 1/3.